Now, welcome to a bit of Star Wars news where I'm going to be covering two stories today, one of which is something I really hope to see happen and is supposedly happening, which is a remake of the game Knights of the Old Republic, and the other being something I don't really want to see happen and I don't think ever will, which is Rian Johnson directing an episode of The Mandalorian. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the good news, which is that after what feels like years of rumors and speculations at this point, it seems we may finally actually be getting a remake of Knights of the Old Republic, the classic RPG which launched the whole Old Republic era in Star Wars. This is according to Jason Schreier of Bloomberg, who said this is basically public knowledge at this point, despite no official confirmation from Lucasfilm, and he said that this is happening, but not by EA, but instead it's being done by Aspyr Studios, who have recently done remasters of old Star Wars games like Pod Racer and Republic Commando. And yes, to be clear, I said remake of Knights of the Old Republic, not remaster, like with the other Star Wars games I just mentioned. And the big difference between the two is that a remaster is just sort of an update or facelift, if you will. Usually it keeps the game as it was intact and maybe enhances it visually. There's no sort of major changes to it. Whereas a remake is just that it's redoing or remaking the game and can oftentimes involve some pretty big changes. Now, when it comes to this apparent Knights of the Old Republic remake, or KOTOR for short, does that mean we'll be seeing changes to the way the game is played, like a complete combat system overhaul, or maybe or changes to the leveling or sort of progression system, which was heavily modeled after the 3rd edition D&D rule set, or the D20 system as it's called, which I thought was really cool to see implemented in KOTOR at the time, and honestly would be happy to see it left intact. As for the combat or combat system itself, well, if we're being fair, it is probably a bit out of date by today's standards. The first Knights of the Old Republic did come out in 2003 after all. It is nearly a 20-year-old game at this point, somehow. Which then also means there's probably a lot of people, especially in that younger crowd, who have never played it and might find the old system a bit, shall we say, clunky. And so if they're remaking the game, I'd have to imagine we'll absolutely see some sort of update on that front. The next really big question would then have to be, will we see changes to the story itself, or maybe additions to it? Now, personally, I don't think you need to change a thing about the story, though I'd be fine if they wanted to maybe add some more side quests or just more depth to the game in general. Not that it lacks it or anything. It's one of the most epic games I've ever played. Anyway, though, I don't think the story needs to be messed with at all, and doing so just sounds like a recipe for disaster. It sounds like playing with fire. They could end up with another sort of Luke Skywalker incident on their hands, since Revan and this game are easily some of the most beloved things in Star Wars, for those who have played it, of course. And I don't know that any good could come from them trying to change things, unless maybe it was the smallest of details, or again, just adding a bit more to the game, or side quests, or content in general. Even though, yes, the story of the game, or Revan's story in the game, and the outcome is very much dictated or decided by the player and their choices, you can get some very different endings depending on whether you are dark side or light, so there is some precedence for maybe messing with the story in that respect. And speaking of the sort of flexible nature of this game, there are some potential tricky ramifications of remaking this, because in theory this would then make Revan and this game official canon, even though I guess they could get away with just saying it's not official canon because it's a remake of an old game. And yes, I know technically Revan is already official canon, since according to the Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary, Palpatine named a legion of Sith troopers after him. Regardless of that though, assuming they stick to what they said a while back, that all new games that come out would be official canon, and do consider this to be a new game and not of course just a simple remake, this would make his story, Revan's story, like I said, official canon, not just the fact that someone named Revan once existed in the Star Wars galaxy and has something to do with the Sith, which is all Palpatine naming a legion of troops after him does. And so, like I said, making this game canon is a bit tricky, since the story of Revan, the character of Revan, is different for everyone. They can even look different, or be a different gender actually. And one way they could handle this or get around it is to leave the character of Revan forever vague in the other parts of the canon, to never see him outside of this game, to only hear about him and his legend, and that different people have different things to say about that legend. Though if they do make this game canon and start digging into the Old Republic era in general, I'm pretty sure they'll use Revan quite often in other stories as well. So anyway, here it's going to be interesting to learn more details about this, to learn just what they mean by remake, what they will be remaking, if it's just the story or kind of the way the game is played, and if they will say that yes, Revan's story is now canon, not just the name, and if that is the case, just what story will they go with? Also here with the cat supposedly out of the bag on this project, if you will, I wonder if maybe, hopefully, we'll get some sort of official announcement or confirmation really soon from Lucasfilm. We are just a couple weeks away now from May the 4th, which would be a great time for that sort of thing. Alright, and moving on, let's talk quickly about the news that Rian Johnson has said he is dying to direct an episode of The Mandalorian, and that he's even talked to Dave Filoni about it, which in itself is kind of odd considering the showrunner is Jon Favreau, not Filoni, which really makes me wonder if Filoni has a bigger role behind the scenes than we're being told, though yes, he is an executive producer on the show, so let's just save any speculation about that for another time. Anyway, I saw a lot of major media outlets reporting on this, that Johnson has said he is dying to direct an episode of The Mandalorian, and that again, he's even spoken to Filoni about it, but that he doesn't currently have the time because of all the work he's doing on Knives Out 2 and Knives Out 3. And I swear the only reason so many want to report on this is just to get a rise and reaction out of Star Wars fans. They love talking about Rian Johnson and bringing up his trilogy, a trilogy that Lucasfilm hasn't talked about in years at this point. And look, in all fairness here, Johnson simply directing an episode of The Mandalorian is different than him writing and directing an episode. Not that I personally want to see him anywhere near Star Wars ever again, though you can certainly feel differently. You may really like the idea of him directing an episode, again, not writing it. And I'm sure there's every chance he'd do a fine job. If this is somehow ever going to happen, I certainly don't think it would be the end of the world. But I just don't think it ever will happen because, as I've said numerous times before, not only do I think we'll never see that trilogy of his that he was promised before The Last Jedi even came out, despite him claiming from time to time that yes, he is still working on it and that it's still happening, but I highly doubt we'll even see him attached to any Star Wars project ever again. Because whether some want to believe it or not, there is a sizable portion of the Star Wars fanbase that simply would not watch anything done by Rian Johnson. They cannot stand either him or The Last Jedi or both. But not only that, but a lot of these fans, right or wrong, would actively try to get others to boycott anything Johnson did, which all that would do is stir up the talk again of how toxic the Star Wars fanbase is. And though yes, I know Disney and Lucasfilm don't have the guts to come out and defend their fans, they won't just say, we get it, some fans didn't like the sequels, but that's okay. That doesn't automatically make them toxic, which is this strange belief held and perpetuated by some. Anyway, I know they won't ever do that because they fear the Twitter mob that would come after them. But behind closed doors, you know they don't want to keep stoking the flames and bringing so much bad press to Star Wars and its fans, which is exactly what would result by bringing Johnson back to do pretty much anything Star Wars related. And no, when you're as massive as Disney, I don't think that saying any publicity is good publicity holds true anymore. For them, it's just bad publicity around one of their prized franchises, which quite honestly has been riddled with controversy and bad management. So in other words here, I don't think it matters that Johnson wants to direct an episode of The Mandalorian, or that he's even talked to Dave Filoni about it. I don't think Disney would ever let that happen. I think they're actually smart enough to realize how bad of an idea that is. Probably, anyway. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Are you excited for a remake of Knights of the Old Republic, and what do you think should be changed? Just the graphics, gameplay, or the story, or what? Or maybe you're just afraid Disney and or Lucasfilm will find a way to screw this up. And what about Rian Johnson directing, and only directing, an episode of The Mandalorian? Would you be okay with that, or do you think he should just be kept away from everything Star Wars entirely? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.